Right now, President Hillary. If you believe the polls, Hillary Clinton is even more of a front-runner for the White House today than she was at this point in the 2008 race. Tonight, the Shadow Hillary campaign and all the players from Amy Chozick of the New York Times, and our panel sounds off on just what kind of president Hillary would be. And then conservatives huff and puff and try to blow President Obama's house down at their CPAC conference. But is all their yelling just for show to put their economic plans in place while conservatives sweat the small stuff? And later, more from former Governor David Paterson of New York, including his take on some top Democrats and a look back on the lowest moments of his tumultuous time in the governor's mansion. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in again tonight for Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us on this Friday evening, March the 7th. We begin tonight, though, in New York City, and the first report card, at least in the polls, on the city's new Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio. Critics, the snow, the press, even the governor have been causing the new mayor political headaches. And tonight there's a sense those headaches may be impacting the mandate that the mayor claims he won on election night. The Wall Street Journal News 4 New York Marist poll gives de Blasio just a 39% approval rating after 2 months on the job. For perspective, consider that Michael Bloomberg's 2-month approval rating was 11 points higher at 50%. Now, to be fair, the numbers aren't all bad for de Blasio. Of the 61% who vote in the approve column, or didn't vote in the approve column, only 10% say the mayor is performing poorly. And race does appear to be a factor in all this. De Blasio gets top marks from 50% of African-American New Yorkers, 45% of Latinos, but just 30% of white city residents. And while Mayor de Blasio's approval ratings may be underwater, people's views of him are not. 59% of those in the poll have a favorable opinion of the mayor. 65% say they think he cares about people like them. 63% say he's fulfilling his campaign numbers. 58% consider de Blasio to be a good leader. So what should we make out of those numbers, and what do they mean for Mayor de Blasio? Well, for that and more, we turn to our panel. Shelley Mayer is here. Shelley is a Democratic New York State Assemblywoman who represents the city of Yonkers. Dominic Carter here as usual, political journalist and author. And to my right in so many ways, Richard St. Paul. He is a Republican strategist and former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. The headline number here is the 39% approval rating. But is this a bad poll for de Blasio all the way through? Just because of that headline, is there reason to worry?
There's reason to worry. The rap on this mayor, and by the way, happy birthday to an official who happens to be sitting at the table with us, a gorgeous, nice,
like that's going to score you points.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
The number's troubling for de Blasio. The rap on this mayor, what the reporters are saying behind the scenes, is that this guy is not ready for prime time. And if he doesn't do something to turn it around fast, get some small victories, do something, the tide is going to build to be too much. And then I don't know how he's going to turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very concerned. Look, 39% job approval rating that basically stems from his attack on charter schools, snowstorm disasters, call dial a friend, get out of jail free card. I mean, these have been disasters after disaster in his administration with no momentum. Well, every time he moves forward, well, New York should have its own minimum wage. Governor Cuomo says, nah, not a good idea. New York should have pre-K. Governor Cuomo, the state should have pre-K. So there's no momentum in his administration at this point in time.
Let me just jump in. I think you're overstating. We're early on. Let me tell you, in Albany, taking out the governor for 1 minute in the assembly, among the New York members of the assembly from New York City, has enormous support and goodwill and the willingness to go back to their districts and tell people to give him time. He needs some better staff who can deal with a very powerful governor. There's no question that I think that's tripped him up. But there's some things he's already accomplished. I mean, the whole effort to reduce traffic fatalities in New York, that is not a racial issue. That is every community. Slowing cars down around schools, something resonates with all parents. Yes, I think the charter school thing was not handled well, and Farina backed up today in her comments. I think they have to get better with their press comments, but I would not jump ahead of ourselves.
Well, and I think you touched on a question that I have. Is it the policies that de Blasio is pursuing that have driven his numbers down, or is it sort of the press and how he's handling himself, both in the press and also when it comes to his own image?
Well, I think overall nothing is really happening. Nothing's taking place. The economy is still very troublesome in New York with almost 10% unemployment. You go, wait, Mayor de Blasio, do as I say, not as I do. While he speeds through the streets, he's telling everybody else to slow down. While the Assembly may be very friendly to Blasio, the Senate is not. It's going to be a non-starter for him to push any minimum wage, New York City only based legislation, or the other legislation he's seeking, which will be the pre-K. So there is no momentum building up. So how do you say I'm doing a good job if I don't have anything to say, look, I'm doing a good job doing?
And having covered the last couple of mayors when they started, from, well, Koch I covered at the end of his term, but Dinkins, Giuliani, Bloomberg, they all started slow. That's not a bad thing sometimes. And they built up, in my opinion, they got some victories under their belt. Before, Mayor de Blasio has this pie in the sky grand vision, and that's great, but you've got to, he doesn't have the team around him with enough experience to take on the challenges that he's currently doing.
Does that raise expectations too high? Because there was so much rhetoric that was so different from anything we've heard coming from the mayor's office in years past. Do you think that maybe set expectations too high and people are wondering, well, where's the beef?
No, because here's the beef. He created this issue of full-day pre-K and after school. All of a sudden, this is part of the conversation.
That
it's
is true.
only because of him.
That's
his
true.
campaign, his high expectations during his campaign. I mean, he's won already in my book. He won. He got this issue. The governor, love him dearly, but this was not in his list. Now this is primary for the whole state. Full-day pre-K and after school was an afterthought of everyone.
So Assemblywoman, why not just claim victory? The governor put up the money and walk away from the increase, the tax increase. It's never going to happen.
Well, I think he'll have to make a decision when. But I think he has a legitimate point about expectation of a stable funding source. I have to know, in Yonkers, we had full-day pre-K, we lost the money, and then we went half-day pre-K. Then we lost the parents, and they send their kids to another pre-K. There's something to be said for a stable financing source, and so I think as a principle it makes sense. There's a common ground. They ought to find it. We ought to declare victory. Mayor de Blasio, credit to him, and then we got move on.
I would agree that the pre-K topic is on the table. However, he definitely wants the money from the rich so he can do other things like pay the unions their increases that he's looking to pay, where there's only $500 million in the Treasury reserve for that, and these unions want a couple of $1 billion. The other thing I would say that he's been proactive with is crime. As you may have heard recently, the Commissioner Bratton has told his police officers that we need to stop low-level crimes like panhandling in the subway.
Into the subways, right.
Which, you know, Giuliani and the broken windows theory started there also. So I think that's positive. Crime, you got to control crime in New York.
Tom, I got to ask, because we've talked a lot about the press and how he's dealt with the press. You know, just before he took office, the woman who was supposed to have been his press secretary, Liz Smith, all of a sudden wasn't qualified for the job because she was dating Elliot Spitzer. Would things have changed? Would things be better for Bill de Blasio if Liz Smith was actually his press secretary?
Certainly. Somebody needs to sit the mayor down and say your strategy is not working. You need a better communications director or a better press secretary. You need somebody that can handle the aggressive New York City press corps. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's to the point where, can it really get any worse for this mayor? I mean,
well, sure, it could. I mean, it finally stopped snowing, at least until next week.
Until next weekend,
right?
Until next week, actually.
But with the snow, he should have been building up goodwill.
That could have been an opportunity.
He should have been building up goodwill. I know the sanitation commissioner is retiring. The sanitation commissioner served 3 or 4 mayors. The last 3 or 4 mayors are I forgot his last name. But anyway, you would think he would have said to the sanitation commissioner, you better be ready. Yes. You better be ready, and you better make things look good.
You live and die by those.
We're gonna, yeah, it's a golden
seen that.
opportunity.
Doherty, Commissioner Doherty.
Yes.
Yeah, it's either make or break on those emergency moments on things like snowstorms. All right, we're going to take a break and switch gears here on RFL. You know, Hillary Clinton may already be both the unstoppable force and the irresistible object in the 2016 presidential campaign. Up next, Amy Chozak from the New York Times describes the shadow campaign that is already underway to get Hillary elected. And later, former New York Governor David Paterson, unfiltered with Dominic, says he's got some mixed feelings about, of all people, President Obama.
And I wondered which of the president's Republican detractors did he ever go after as hard as he did 3 African Americans from New York. The thought crossed my mind.